Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets lose once again, but this time with the visiting New York Knicks, they send a bit of a moral victory message as they play them tight, they play them down to the wire, they come up short and improve their tankathon odds. We dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms, and let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And Doug, really impressive night for D'Angelo Russell overall. You also made mention there of Day'Ron Sharpe, who I think has benefited significantly from having D'Angelo Russell brought into this team via the trade. He ends up giving you just 14 minutes. So it's funny that we talk about him in a very glowing fashion for a small sample size. 3 of 4, gets to the line 4 times, knocks them all down. Kind of a big deal for bigs on the Brooklyn Nets. And then gives you 3 rebounds, a plus 15 on the margins, and 10 points. He just looks like he fits better into the flow of things relative to Nicholas Claxton, different players, different roles. But in a year when you want to see some growth from guys, Day'Ron Sharpe, we haven't seen the full minutes, in the role that we want to see, but he has looked comfortable when he's been out there on the court, even if it's been smaller samples.
Well, the other way you win is again, to what I said with D'Angelo Russell, is that you don't play the players that are playing really well. You sit them out, because Day'Ron's the other one, like Claxton.
Right.
We can talk
play
about
him 20 minutes, the Nets win the game probably.
I mean, Claxton gets completely brutalized for long stretches by Karl Anthony Towns, to the point where they just cleared Towns out, like at the top of the key, and they just said have it, and he would just take him to the rim. Anyway, but not to have him catch a stray here while we're talking about D'Angelo Russell and Day'Ron Sharpe, but like when we talk about getting bigs into the action in ways that they can really utilize their skill sets, if you're a good big-bodied screen setter, right, then D'Angelo Russell can kind of do business with you, because he's going to set you up on the screen. He's going to methodically make it so the defender, he's going to use the geometry to make sure the defender walks himself into that screen. And he's just going to kind of get you on his hip and then decide what to do, right? Like he's going to get you on his hip, decide what to do. He's going to pull up for a 3 if you just give him too much space and come over. Like he can shoot the 3 if you come over. He can shoot the 3 if you come too far under. If you come too far under, but he doesn't have the shot, he's going to get the guy rolling to the rim, and he's a threat to pull up in the mid-range because he can hit that shot, right? So he actually is kind of the guy, if you play with a big-bodied center who has any clue, then you can really, like I said, do business with that, because that's exactly what his skill set is. And it's not a ton of minutes. The other guy, I'm telling you, if they just play Day'Ron 20 minutes and take Claxton off for 5 more minutes, they might win. Like that's how well that combination was working. These two guys have played 47 minutes so far this year. You want to take a guess what their net rating is? I mean, these are small sample sizes, but it does pass the eye test. And so
47 minutes. I'll just say I'll say plus 18.
You are off by half almost. Plus
36?
Wow. It's plus 34. Yeah, plus 34.
Plus so it's 34. Nearly like it's like when they're on the court together, it's a win. Like, it's a victory when they play together, essentially.
Again, very small sample size, but this was one of those numbers that I looked up while watching the game, because I was like, this makes sense. Like watching those two guys play, I was like, man, this makes a lot of sense. Like, I wonder how much they've even played together. I knew they had, but I was like, and so they just crushed it last night. Their minutes totally crushed last night, and they just completely crushed when they played together, because basketball-wise, geometry-wise, sort of like basketball 101, that pairing makes a lot of sense. And I just think it's funny that was like, oh, if you were trying to win the game, this is the pairing you would throw out there for a bit of a longer stretch, but you're not that interested in doing that. So we don't get a bigger sample size, because that's really kind of like not the goals here.
And speaking of catching strays here, the former Brooklyn Net in Spencer Dinwiddie, it's like when you watch D'Angelo Russell work himself down to the paint and then lob one up, and the timing, it's timing, rhythm, and everything. That's what matters so much for a guy, not just bigs, but for Day'Ron Sharpe specifically, because it's not like he is just this freak athlete that can contort his body when the ball is in the air. It needs to be consistent for him. and to reflect back on, Spencer Dinwiddie, lob it, and just kind of, alley-oop to the moon possibly, or maybe to your waist. Like, we don't know where that ball is going to go. D'Angelo Russell, as we said before about the way he plays the game, it's very methodical, very plotting in a good way. So when he puts up the lobs, it's also the ball goes right where you think you would extend your hands out to grab and put down, right? And those things matter, I think, especially for someone like Day'Ron. Coming up here in a second, guys. Let's have a little conversation about what else happened. The Nets gained 5.2% in the odds to land a top 4 pick. Isn't that why you watch sports? We'll take a look at the Tankathon odds here to close things out in just one moment. All right. As we talk about the Brooklyn Nets, 99-95, they lose. That's okay. It's the New York Knicks. It's a bad night for Mikal Bridges. The heck with him. By the way, let me just clarify too, because for the fans that do like to throw a little bit onto the proverbial grave of Mikal Bridges, 34 minutes, 3 of 12. Yikes. 2 of 6 from deep. Blech. 2 steals. Okay, I guess. Only 10 points in those 34 minutes of action. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't trade 1 pick for a player of that caliber. Now, we talk about the Nets and the Tankathon odds, though. Some other teams won last night, and so the Nets actually have themselves in 6th position. Can I ask you a quick question here, Doug, about the journey to getting here? Do you know the Nets' record over the last 17 games?
It's got to be so bad. They beat the Blazers. It's like 2-15. 3. Yeah.
Nope,
Okay.
2-15. 2-15 over the last 17 games. So when you think about the fact that they were once upon a time, they had 12 wins and they had, quick math, 13. Like, they were right there. They were a team that was 525 games into the season. And in the blink of an eye and a couple of trades later, this team has absolutely dumpstered. And even in doing that, it's still a battle because Charlotte's 11-28. Portland's right behind you. They've won now 2 in a row, by the way. So Portland doing some real favors here for the Brooklyn Nets. 15-28. These 12-win teams in the Pelicans, who have also, though, won 4 in a row. Who knows what they're doing? 7-3 in their last 10. So there's some things happening here for the Brooklyn Nets near the top of the Tankathon odds where you don't have to squint too hard and say, we can get to that 5th spot. And that's where you jump up to that 42.1% top 4, that 10.5% for the number 1 overall pick. And we understand it's all ping pong balls, but we continue to say that's probably the target for the Nets here, realistically, understanding the, again, in the spirit it's intended, damage they did early in the year with some of their winning.
By the way, just like little point the finger toward me here. I've done incredible with these guessing games. I think that like the last 3 or 4 that you've thrown out there, the plus minus ones plus the record. I mean, I just want to. Let's just not just pass over that very quickly. Absolutely incredible job by me.
Yeah, let's grind the podcast down to a stop and just reach back up over your shoulder. Give yourself a nice one on the back, and then we'll try to ramp it back up. Did you want to talk about the Tankathon odds at all, or is there anything else that you were?
Not really, man. I just got so very impressed with my 2-15 guess.
I'm just truly impressed with what I've accomplished.
No, it was a nice night for that because like is Toronto getting the win, Portland getting the win. These are the things that we're just the Wizards will never catch these losers because these guys stink. I mean, these guys stink so bad. There's no chance on a game-to-game basis that they can really win. But shuffling as the Tankathon odds move, you kind of do have to set your sights on like sort of what's possible, right? Mm-hmm. Because what's possible here are the Hornets and the Pelicans. These are the 2, right? That are you're looking for to be like considerably better. Because with Zion back, you presumably the Hornets have enough talent between like Melo and Miles Bridges and guys like this. So it's like these are the teams that you kind of have to set your sights on. It's going to be work on the losing end to try to get there. Maybe Toronto too, if like Barnes and Barrett and they can get IQ back. They just dug themselves into this weird hole with just a few of these wins that pissed fans off so bad that didn't want this. And I get it. This is like the Tommy DeVito style stuff for the Giants. It's like, can we just not do this? Like, can we just not do this right now? It's not worth it. Especially when you see like Jaden Daniels, in the conference championship, right? So, but again, it's a good analog for like sort of why you don't want this to happen. Like, and sometimes there are situations where it crosses against sports. It's like, it's a little easier to see with football because there's so few games and like each game really does matter. And you can just literally point to the game. It's like that one. That's the reason we don't have Jaden Daniels now, and now we have, a question mark here. So it's a little harder with the net stuff because there's just so many games, but it's also why some of these wins kind of do matter because 3 wins in the standings, 3 losses in the standings is hard to make up when these other teams also stink.
Yeah.
Right? Like and they also understand the assignment to some degree too. They see Cooper Flagg, they see Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey's been balling out recently, and so like kind of solidifying himself in the top of that group. And so you're like, there's a group up here, and we want to be in it.
Yeah, and we'd like to be a part of that group.
And frankly, too, my last thought on this, and I know I've gone, is that GMs usually can extend the lifespan of their like job. It seems works for football too. It's weird. It's like if we can get to the top of the draft and we can draft one of these superstars, we then actually extend our own job timeline because we say, hey, this was part of the plan, and they're not going to be good right away. So we got like 4 more years to kind of put it. Yeah, exactly. We got 4 more years to kind of put it together around this guy. Right. So like it is actually, it's like it's a job security extension for the GMs too, because it's sort of understood that like, yeah, we're going to draft first, but now we have to watch what we do now that we have this guy. And you kind of have like
you wait.
Yeah. So it's just like it's just gonna be hard to catch some of these teams, I think.
Well, and it's funny too, because you mentioned that thinking about the NFL, and the difference there is like when you have the worst record, you get the best pick, right? NBA, you can try to battle your way to the bottom, but they try to flatten this out a little bit because there's more games and because it matters. It makes it for a worse product if you have a third of the league all going, oh, we're going for it all the way to the scene of the accident here, as far as getting as high as you can in the odds. The other, I want to shout out, we don't do this all the time, but sometimes somebody really puts it together in a nice way. Shout out to Lamont Hunt over on X, fan of the show. He's in the comments usually a lot. I just thought this is a great way to phrase this. We may have taken an adventurous path to get here, but everything is going according to plan. That was his take on, how we've come now to be 6th in the Tankathon odds, still in a good position, plenty of losing to do here. And it'll be interesting to see, because we just talked about Cam Johnson and how maybe he'll be here through the deadline. What's the problem? Whatever. But we've also been given these doses of the Nets, as we talked about it after the games, where D'Angelo Russell wasn't playing. He was hurt and nursing a hamstring. Cam Johnson wasn't on the court. Now, the minute restriction things are going to happen here. But this was a reminder that, again, a Jordi Fernandez coach team is going to play so hard that they have to strategically start sitting people at certain stretches of the game. And there are going to come some matchups where it doesn't matter, where the starters get you a lead or play well enough that even when you sit them down, the bench unit has had some experience and they get you some of these wins. So I do come back to this trade deadline table. If you want to secure it, I know we said it's hard and development wise, D'Angelo Russell and what he brings. Take D'Angelo Russell off this team. Like give him away. And where is this roster going to be? Could be damaging to the development of a lot of guys. May make Day'Ron Sharpe not look so good anymore, but will also make every game on the schedule pretty enticing to label as a loss, regardless of who else is on the court for them. And that's a terrible way to look at it, but it is the reality of where this team is.
And they kind of trying to thread the needle with games like last night, right? Where it's like, hey, we'll just sit them for a crucial stretch because that's just not what we're interested in having happen. It's like, we're going to set aside the minutes early. These are going to be the rotations. We're going to set ourselves on the rotations, and we'll let the chips fall where they may. And that feels like the situation that they're having happen here. It's like, look, this is when you're going to play. And it's not going to matter up 10, down 20, down 2. It just doesn't matter. You're just coming back in, and you have to be okay with that. And I do wonder if that conversation has sort of been had, right? Like, where it's like, we're just, we want to win, everyone play hard, but you're just going back in the game with 4 minutes left. Doesn't matter what's happening. And I think that that's probably the situation we're looking at. So maybe you thread the needle like that, and you just say, if you play 30 minutes a game, and we'll just, and what happens behind you is so atrocious on a point guard's level, at least like now, that we're not too worried about it. But maybe that's just what they end up doing. And it helps with the development of some of these other guys. It's close. It's a close call, I think. But I mean, clearly you would rather have Cooper Flagg than develop Day'Ron Sharpe, 15% more. So I think that that math is not that hard to figure out.
We didn't get Cooper Flagg, but I think Tosan really showed us something down the stretch.
Yeah, well, so it's like that math isn't difficult to really parse out, but I do understand why you want to do it, because you see it oh, these guys look better. Like these guys, other players get an opportunity to see what being on a court with real basketball players looks like, and that is worth something.
Yeah. Nets will have, as we mentioned, the Suns tonight, and then they won't play again until Saturday. So they clump these games right together there in the middle of the week, and then a couple of days off. So we'll probably get a perspective as other teams continue to play out this week, where the Nets are in the standings, where they are in the odds, and everything else in between. Plus, the deadline continues to approach, so we'll focus more in on some of those teams that could be calling for Cameron Johnson and maybe other players on this roster as we work our way through the week.
We're going to get out of here. Much appreciate everyone that's rocking with us on YouTube. In the comments section, those are still popping off every single day. So go subscribe over on YouTube as we try to get to 8,000 followers. Locked On Nets over on YouTube.
Nature gives to every time and season some beauties of its own. And from morning to night, as from the cradle to the grave, it is but a succession of changes, so gentle and easy that we can scarcely mark their progress. And that, my friends, is a successful version of the quote from yesterday by one Charles Dickens.
R.I.P. Right? He's not left. Okay.
Yeah.
Gone
tried
too
to
soon.
hold on, but
one of the all-time great poets. We're back in tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.